Magic Misfits, Chapter 8. The singing thieves had been foiled, Theo said, moving away from the crowd and toward the curb. Thanks to you. I was just following your lead, Theo, Carter admitted. How'd you know what they were planning to do? I had no clue, said Theo. I was passing by, stopped to watch, and then noticed their sneaky game. If not for you, I would have made a fool of myself. He gave Carter a quick nod of gratitude. I could have sworn they put the stolen objects in the bag. No matter. We saved the day. Since you know my name, would you mind sharing yours? Carter. Nice to meet you, Carter. A fortunate coincidence you being here, Theo said, adjusting the cufflinks on his sleeves. Then he pushed the violin bow back into the pocket of his tuxedo pants, despite it being longer than his thigh. How did you do that? Carter asked. The bow is way too long to fit in your pocket. And how did you make the money sack move? Theo grinned from ear to ear. I'm afraid I will not be revealing that to you just yet. Perhaps another time. But I must admit, I am impressed. You have sweet skills, too. Carter's chest swelled. It felt like a great compliment, especially coming from a boy in a tuxedo who spoke like British royalty. Why were you helping the people in the crowd? Asked Carter. Because they could not help themselves, Theo said. They did not know they had been robbed. But what did you get out of it? Carter asked. Nothing, I suppose, Theo said, except knowing that I did what was right. That's worth something. What is wrong? You look confused. Carter was confused. Mr. Vernon used magic but wasn't selling anything. Layla used magic to escape things for fun. And Theo used magic to help others. But if experience, and Uncle Sly, had taught Carter anything, it was that others would always let him down. Yet in these people, he felt kindred spirits. They reminded Carter of himself. Not knowing what to say, Carter gave a wave and mumbled, Well, nice meeting you. You're leaving? A voice asked. But we just arrived. Carter turned to see Leia coming down the sidewalk alongside a girl in a wheelchair whose hair was red and unruly. Leia wore a smile, while the other girl gave Carter a cautious, almost annoyed, once-over. Carter, you know Theo? Leia asked, surprised. Just met, actually, Carter answered. You know Layla? Theo asked Carter. Small town, Layla said. And I'm Ridley Larson. And yes, I'm in a wheelchair. Don't ask me about it, or you'll get a bloody nose. Cross my heart, Carter said, crossing his heart. Theo squeezed Carter's shoulder. You'll never guess what just happened. Probably not, said Ridley. How about you just tell us? Theo went on to relate the tale of how Carter had helped him stop the group of criminals from robbing the crowd in the park. You should have seen us! A perfect team! That's amazing, Carter, said Layla. Very impressive. Theo did most of the work, Carter added. I was just sort of his assistant. Just then, a group of 4 kids dressed in expensive-looking clothes walked past and snickered, pretending, though not really, to hide their laughter. At the same time, Carter, Layla, Theo, and Ridley looked down at their feet and all whispered, Jerks. They all looked at one another and, at the same time, said, They weren't laughing at you, they were laughing at me. All 4 chuckled and then turned toward the magic shop. People laugh at me because they think I'm strange, Layla explained as she led the group up the street. I like being strange. People laugh at me because I wear a tuxedo, Theo added. My parents got a great deal at the Tuxedo Emporium before I was even born. People laugh at me because I'm smarter than them, Ridley said. She flicked at a bike bell that was attached to the arm of her wheelchair. It rang out. Ring, ring! It's not my fault that they don't read books. People laugh at me for all sorts of reasons, Carter finished. He could not bring himself to tell them that the reasons were his worn-out clothes and his unwashed hair, and that he sometimes dug through trash cans for dinner. They walked in silence for a bit. Then Layla asked, Who wants cookies? She stopped in front of Vernon's magic shop. My papa made Linzer tarts this morning. Two women wearing fancy floral dresses and wide-brimmed hats swung the door open and exited the shop, pushing past the group, laughing hysterically. "What a fantastic store!" one of the women cried out. "You kids have fun in there." "We always do," said Layla, waving theirs to follow her inside. The store parrot squawked from her perch near the register and everyone jumped. The bird repeated what sounded like an odd poem. "Rub the yellow piranha for the Magician's Club. Rub the yellow piranha for the Magician's Club." "What's the yellow piranha?" asked Carter. Layla shrugged. "Usually our parrot is smart, but sometimes she just says nonsense. Carter, meet Presto. Presto, meet Carter." "Nice to meet you," Carter said, unsure if he should offer a hand to shake. He'd never talked to a bird before. The bird squawked again, insistent. "Rub the yellow piranha for the Magician's Club!" "Yes, yes, Presto, my girl," said a voice near the ceiling. When Carter looked up, Mr. Vernon was standing on the balcony overhead, still holding that feather duster as if it were his magic wand. "We all heard you, crazy parrot." That seemed to be enough to calm the bird down. "Sorry, friends. She gets excited sometimes." "Excited isn't the word I'd use," Layla whispered. When she waved her hand, the parrot flew over and landed on her shoulder. Layla made kissing sounds, and Presto echoed them back to her. Then they both giggled. My gosh, there's pets in this book as well. There's pets everywhere in our classroom now. Ridley glanced around the store. "Where's my top hat?" Carter thought it best not to ask why Ridley would keep her top hat at Vernon's magic shop. Theo reached underneath the counter and pulled out the white rabbit that had been hopping around the store earlier that day. "Come here, Top Hat," Ridley cooed, a true smile spreading across her face. Theo placed the rabbit on Ridley's lap, where it nestled against her stomach, nose twitching furiously. Excuse me. "Ridley's mom is allergic," Layla explained, "so we're babysitting Top Hat for her." "The other Mr. Vernon has been feeding her well," Mr. Vernon said. "Don't you worry, Ridley." "I'm not worried, not one bit." A knowing smile appeared beneath Vernon's black mustache as he turned to Carter. "I see you've met the others." "I did," Carter said, but his mind questioned whether the meeting was by chance or by design. Had Mr. Vernon purposely asked Carter to return at 4, knowing the kids would be getting off school? "Do you three meet here a lot?" Carter asked Layla. "Every Friday after school lets out," Layla said. "Ridley is homeschooled, Theo goes to private school, and I go to public, so we don't get to see one another except here. We meet, talk illusions and tricks, and of course practice." "I practice levitation," Theo said, "as in making things float in the air. You saw my work earlier today." "I love learning about transformation," Ridley added. She pulled a top hat off a nearby shelf, moved it behind her wheelchair, and when it reappeared, it had become a book with a top hat on the cover. "I like to change objects from one to another," she said. "And I escape," Layla said. "Dad, can you please chain me upside down in a tank full of water?" "I can, and I will, when you turn 18, Mr. Vernon said. Ridley turned to Carter and asked pointedly, "Do you have a skill?" "I don't know," Carter said, blood rushing to his face. He thought of his parents disappearing. He thought of running away from Uncle Sly. "I guess you could say I make things vanish." "I could say that?" Ridley asked with a smirk. "We should say that," Theo finished, raising an eyebrow at her. "Making things vanish is a fantastic skill for a magician," Mr. Vernon interjected. "Using a similar technique in reverse is called production. I suspect you're quite good at both. After all, many magical routines use a combination of those very ideas. A great magician learns to master not one, but many of the various effects. For example, the classic trick with cups and balls uses vanishes, productions, penetrations, transformations, and transportations." "How long have you been practicing magic?" Carter asked. Since I was about your age, Mr. Vernon said. Back then, I had a group of friends who would get together, just like these three do now. When I grow up, I want to be known as the first female Houdini, Layla said. I will take after Harry Keller and levitate a princess, Theo noted. Or maybe even a queen, if I can find one. No one is as great as John Neville Maskelyne, commented Ridley. He was not only a stage magician, but an inventor and a writer as well. The three began to argue. Clearly this was an argument that they had had many times before, and there would be no winner. Carter and Mr. Vernon exchanged an amused glance. Opinions are like hearts, Mr. Vernon said. Everybody's got one. Not everybody, Carter answered. I know some people who seem pretty heartless. Still full of doubt, I see. Vernon squinted at him. No matter. A healthy amount of skepticism is not a bad thing, especially when trying to make new friends. Friends? Carter echoed. Isn't that why you're here? Vernon asked. Carter set his jaw. I'm here because you told me to come back at 4 o'clock. Is that so? You were a little late. Up went the pointy white eyebrow. You probably did not notice, though, because you were so busy strolling down Main Street with this trio, who definitely do not want to be your new friends. Layla, Theo, and Ridley emerged from a huddle. They were all staring at Carter. What is it? He asked, his voice cracking. What did I say? My vote is yes, said Theo. He saved me. My vote is no, said Ridley. He's too green. My vote is yes, too, Layla smiled, and my reasons are my own. Carter, we've just voted and would like to invite you to our secret hideout. Are you in? Carter had to hold back from shouting yes, all in capitals. Instead, he smiled and then gave a little nod. Layla put on an upper crusty tone and said, Father, if you wouldn't mind turning away. Of course, Mr. Vernon grinned, adding with a dramatic whisper that one of these days I will find that secret hideout, and then it'll be all over for you rascally kids. Layla chuckled as she walked toward a bookshelf at the rear of the store and pulled on a thick volume entitled Secret Passages. The bookshelf made a clicking sound, and then moved outward to reveal a doorway to a darkened, windowless room. This is where Dad hides the good stuff that's not for sale, Layla said, flicking a light switch on the wall. But we adopted it as our secret HQ. Carter was so shocked, all words flew from his head. Inside this new secret room were antique reading chairs, lamps, more shelves adorned with pieces of knotted rope, elaborate heart-shaped locks with matching keys, and countless old photos of smiling people covering the walls. There was even a framed portrait of Houdini with his wrists shackled together. This was clearly Layla's space. Next to a pile of leather trunks, a tiny wood stove warmed the room. Nearby, the wall was hung with a framed picture of Layla being hugged by her two dads. When Uncle Sly did a trick, Carter thought, it was to gain something. But here, behind the secret door, there were no tricks. It was an invention. It was an invitation to be part of a group, a team, a crew. Whether that included new friends, Carter wasn't yet sure. Instinctively, his hand trailed down to his satchel. He touched the wooden box and a warm, welcoming feeling of home flooded over him. Or at least, it was what Carter imagined a home to feel like. He only had vague memories of that little red cottage with white trim where he'd once lived with his parents. Pretty awesome, huh? Layla asked. It's perfect, Carter whispered. Layla raced up to the apartment above the shop and fetched the Linzer tarts from the kitchen. When she returned, she blew a kiss to Mr. Vernon, then closed the door to the secret room. She and the others began to pore over the books and discuss future plans. Carter simply couldn't believe it. This morning, he had woken up alone on a park bench, and now these strangers had invited him into their home and, further, into their secret place. It was amazing how a chance meeting and a few laughs could bring such different people together. It was almost like... Carter didn't have another word for it. It was like magic.